Gary Numan exploded onto the music scene in the late 70s, and his sound has understandably changed a lot from where it is now. So are you a fan or not? Hi guys, and welcome to Piano and Keyboard Artist, where we discuss the artists related to pianos, keyboards and synthesizers. And yes, it's another Gary Numan video, and this time we're discussing the comparison between Newman and 9 Inch Nails. 9 Inch Newman. Now the title of this video may be quite inflammatory to you if you're a Gary Numan fan, but you're in good hands because if you've been on this channel from the beginning, you will know that I am a huge Gary Numan fan. And the idea for this video came about really after I was reading the comments on the previous Gary Numan videos that I've done. Links in the description to all those videos that I've done are below. Please do check them out. Now in a lot of those videos, most of the comments have been overwhelmingly positive. Of course, there have been a few prickly ones, but the comments that I'm sort of paying attention to the most for this video are the sort of constructively critical comments from people who are fans, who said things like they are a fan but they're not really a fan of the new sound. I'm really addressing the interesting comment from one of the subscribers who said he likes Gary Numan, but he's not so much a fan of the fact that Gary has now become, in his words, 9 Inch Newman, so to speak. And that I thought is an interesting subject for a video, because Gary Numan was very sort of, especially when he released his 2000 Pure album, in an interview he did say when people listen to this album they will probably hear that I've been listening to 9 Inch Nails and I do not have a problem with that. And Trent Reznor, by his own admission, is also a huge Gary Numan fan and has said how Gary Numan's sound has influenced him. So this hereby completes the circle. You know, it is impossible to be an artist these days and not be influenced by someone. Just to get a bit philosophical, a question was once asked, I remember hearing a lecturer talking, and the question put to this lecturer was, if Mozart and Beethoven and those great composers were around these days, would they still write those pieces? And the answer was no, they wouldn't, because obviously they would be influenced, because we are all influenced. But on the subject of Gary Numan sounding like 9 Inch Nails, I personally disagree. I can obviously see the comparisons and why people would say that. But to me, Gary Numan's sound is very unique. He's always sounded like himself. Certainly his voice and the way he uses it. He's got that, notice when he sings, he's got that kind of yodel. You know, I'm not trying to sound funny, or I'm not trying to replicate him, but he has got this kind of way of going like this. And when he finishes a line, he's got that, at the end of it. You know what I mean. He's got a very unique way of doing what he does. Trent is a different beast altogether. Now, I'm not a huge 9 Inch Nails fan, when I say that, that does not mean I dislike 9 Inch Nails. I really respect them and give them credit for what they've done. I think the production and everything is brilliant. It's just not my particularly kind of go-to type of music, and I've heard enough of it to know that I'm not a fan. And when I say I'm not a fan, that does not mean I hate it. I'm just not going to put their records on, I'm just not a fan. Having said that, what is interesting was, and a shout out to one of my friends and Facebook members, Tom J. Carpenter from Analog Solutions. Tom did say, interestingly once, he said, Vaughn, you should do a video addressing why is it that Depeche Mode fans are very often 9 Inch Nails fans, but then very often they're not. Yeah, because you'll find people who like Depeche Mode and Gary Numan and 9 Inch Nails, you usually find people who like those three bands usually like those three bands. But then you also find sometimes there are those people who hate Depeche Mode but love 9 Inch Nails, and vice versa. And that's also very interesting as well. But coming back to the Newman sound, The Newman sound obviously has evolved dramatically since his inception in the late 70s. Now remember, Gary was part of a punk band, Two Boy Army, signed to Beggars Banquet. And in interviews and in reviews, Gary has talked about how he was, I think as a punk, his heart was never really in it. I think it was just a way for him to get into music. But of course, as we know, Gary found himself the day he walked into that recording studio, and there was a mini Moog or a Moog standing there, and he walked up to it, he hit the key, and the thing emitted this massive thunderous sound, and that spawned the Gary Numan we know now. He was obviously in the studio to record a punk album, but after having this eureka moment, he went back to the offices of Beggars Banquet and he said, okay, I'm going to still make this album, but I'm going to use a synthesizer. They weren't happy, and anyway, the rest is history. And we all know how Gary Numan, when he sort of exploded onto the scene with Friends Electric, Our Friends Electric, and it did piss a lot of people off, especially people who had been in the music scene for a long time. And then to see this newcomer coming seemingly out of nowhere and then just dominating the airwaves, that did piss a lot of people off. But of course, he did gain a lot of fans. But Gary did sort of retire very soon. I mean, he I think after the initial success with Our Friends Electric, he retired 18 months after that. And that was really just because of the pressure, the death threats. His mom, there was a kidnapping threat on his mum. His dad found a petrol bomb under his car, and someone sent Gary Numan a live bullet in the post. And, many of the examples of human beings just being dickheads again because they are jealous. But Gary did fold, and of course, when he tried to come back again, he just struggled to get to that level. He was never taken seriously. He struggled with his sound and his image. But if we look at Gary Numan's Disastrous period, sort of from the mid-80s up to peaking on the disastrously dreadful 1992 Machine and Soul album, which I still have a soft spot for, I'm not going to trash it completely, it was evident that in this period Gary Numan had lost his way and was really just trying to find himself. If I think of albums like Berserker and Outland, which I do personally really like, but of course I'm a fan, so I am biased. If you listen to an album like Outland, you can hear the over-reliance on female vocals. Now, Gary has always used female vocals in his albums, but it's just at this point, it was almost like he had become a backing singer in his own act, and he would mix his vocals very far into the background and push the female vocals forwards. I'm thinking of songs like Call Out the Dogs, when he sings that old slogan, an old story, a disease, never again. He sings like that, and then he gets the woman to sing the higher part. Whereas I think in earlier years, he would have gone, a slogan, an old story. He would have really sung the higher octave. But as I say, it was very evident in this period that he was losing confidence and faith in himself. And the press and the media were not making it easier because they were really going for him. And of course, as we know, it all turned around in 1994 when he met Gemma O'Neill. Of course, Gemma had been a long-time fan, but they sort of got together romantically. And Gemma is really, I would say, is responsible for the Gary Numan we have these days, because he was at a point where he was just washed up and he was in so much debt. There was just no way out. And Gemma really offered the solution, and the solution was simple. It was, Gary, your last few records have not sounded like you. Why don't you just get into the studio and make a record for yourself? Just do it as a hobby and have some fun. And those were the words of wisdom that Gary Numan listened to. He bought himself, I think, a 16-track or an 8-track Porter studio, got himself an SM58 mic. It was all very, very low-key and very, very simplistic, and he produced the 1994 Sacrifice album. Now, I like the Sacrifice album. If you listen to it now, it does sound a bit demo. It doesn't sound, very polished. It does have a real sort of demo sound to it. However, it does have essence of the real core, broody and honest Newman sound, and that is what I love about Sacrifices, because it is really the kind of album, it is the point where he really found himself. 1995 he released the Human album, followed that up with 1997's Exile album, and this is really where he's starting to find himself. Exile was an interesting album because it was really a concept album based on the Bible and heavily influenced by Depeche Mode's Songs of Faith and Devotion album, which was an album that Gemma introduced Gary to, because she was a big Depeche Mode fan, and she said, listen to this. And Gary has sort of credited Depeche Mode's Songs of Faith and Devotion album as a very important album that really helped him gain his focus. And of course, you know, where the pieces really came together, you know, sort of starting from Sacrifice, it was when Gary released the 2000 Pure album that he went from being a laughingstock to being rated as an incredibly influential and credible artist with critical acclaim from the rock press. And there's just not, coming up, you know, fast forward to now, there is not anything bad said about Gary Numan. The story really is of the guy who was down and out and beaten, and, you know, it's the story of resurrection and, you know, rising from the ashes. So if we look at the most recent albums since Pure, then you had, what was it, Jagged, Dead Sun Rising, Splinter, and the most recent one being Savage, Songs from a Broken World, which is groundbreaking and sonically brilliant. And, you know, this is, with the last three albums, Gary has relied heavily on Aid Fenton, and that, you know, I think the collaboration works, and I think they're so entwined at the moment that it's hard to sometimes hear where Gary starts and Aid Fenton ends, or, you know, because I think Aid Fenton has become such an integral part of Gary Numan's sound. But the last five albums are great. My only criticism is, and remember I'm a fan, is that I suppose they are a bit, it's a little bit samey in some ways, meaning, you know, it seems as though that since Gary found that, since 2000, on the Pure album, since he found that, he's really sort of like locked into that style, and it's like that he's going wholeheartedly for that. And respect to him for doing that, I suppose. It's because he's not sort of getting his eye off the ball. He's really just doing what he wants to do, and understandably, he is having a lot of success doing that. But now coming back to the comparison with Nine Inch Nails, I just feel that although they are within the same genre, I still think they're completely different. I mean, Trent's music has more like a kind of a rockier kind of thing going, whereas Gary's has got more of a Newman thing going, which is it's very difficult for me to put Newman in a box, because he's always been his own kettle of fish. And it is interesting if we listen to how Gary Numan's sound has changed. As I say, he's been around for 41 years now. He's now currently working on his new Intruder album. And indeed, he has gained new fans and he's lost fans. So there are those who have said, okay, since Gary Numan started that hard, aggressive sound, they've lost interest. But then there are those who said, since Gary started that hard, aggressive sound, they've come on board. And then there are those which we call the Newmanoids, who are like the hardcore fans, who have been with Gary ever since the late 70s and are still with him and will always be there for him. And these are like the lifeblood of Gary Numan's fan base. There are, of course, the people who have been with him all along but prefer certain periods. Love him or loathe him, Gary Numan is a fascinating artist. You know, he's had highs and lows and he's kept going. And I've always referred to him as a very brave and courageous man, because think of the kind of ridicule and harshness that has been directed towards him. You know, a lot of people would have just folded, but, you know, he just carried on. And he does say that his Asperger's syndrome has a lot to do with his success, because Asperger's, from what I can understand, it's a form of autism where apparently you can become very obsessed and very locked into something very specific. And he's harnessed the positive side of his Asperger's syndrome and used that tunnel vision that it gives you, apparently, and really focused in on what he does. And he's been very successful. Apparently, one of the other upside to Asperger's is it gives you this tendency to not give a fuck. So when people criticize you, it's kind of like water off a duck's back. So anyway, he's, in his own words, he's harnessed the positive side to his Asperger's syndrome. There is so much we can talk about Gary Numan. I do want to do a video later on where I'm going to be breaking down some of the classic Numan riffs on the keyboard and the piano and just running you through them. I think that'll be a lot of fun. But for now, my friends, I'd like you to leave your comments below. Let me know what you think of Gary Numan, his sound versus the way it's changed. Does he sound too much like Nine Inch Nails? Do you think Do you prefer his old sound, or do you like the direction he's going? Anything you want to say, there are no wrong answers here. If this is your first time to my channel, I would like to welcome you with open arms and say I hope you will hit that subscribe button and join us for the duration. Check out my previous videos. We're growing from strength to strength with a great community. Also check out the Vaughn George Facebook page. We're also on Instagram and Twitter. Introduce yourself and join this fun and positive community. And to those of you who have been with me from the beginning, guys, you know I love you as always, and I'm so grateful for your support. I also have a Patreon page, and links to how you can contact me are below. My friends, take care of yourself in these difficult times. Don't be a dick. Be good to each other. And I will see you soon in the next video. Adios.